We're talking NFL Draft and NFL Combine with ESPN draft analyst Jordan Reid. That's coming up next here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm Patricia Traina, and thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. And on today's episode, I have ESPN draft analyst Jordan Reid. Some of you might remember him. I had him on last year when he was with Pro Football Network. He has since risen up the ranks. He is with the Worldwide Leader, part of the NFL draft team, and does a great job. And he was very kind enough to come on the program with me to talk about combines, to talk about some of the prospects that have been linked to the Giants, do a comparison sort of thing. So really looking forward to hearing from Jordan on today's show. Now, before we get into today's show, a couple quick things. First, just a reminder that tomorrow we will have, starting at 11 o'clock, a live 2-hour show with none other than the entertainer. That's right. You're going to get another dose of Tana and Traina as we talk about all things Giants and a lot of stuff to talk about. So we will get caught up. We'll take your questions, and hopefully we'll just pass the 2 hours quickly and have a good time of it, like we always seem to do whenever the Tana and I get together. So looking forward to that as always. Now, before we dive into the interview with Jordan Reid, on Monday, I will have my full interview with Giants cornerback Adoree Jackson. Now, I did post an article on Giants Country, a little snippet, if you will. One of the many things Adoree and I talked about during our one-on-one call. And if you want to check that out, kind of get a little sneak peek, you can head on over to giantscountry.com. It is one of the more recent articles, so it should be right there at the top of the page, if not in the hero section. All right, so Jordan Reid coming up next. But first, folks, I got to tell you, unfortunately, Jordan was driving when he did the interview, so I was not able to get video of him. But I have video of myself. Yeah, whoopee, right? I've got video of myself, and I've tried to kind of fill in some of the gaps when Jordan was talking with pictures and stuff. So apologies. It just, Jordan's a very busy man these days, and, you can't sit there and make too many demands of your guests. So I'm just thankful that he was able to come on and give me as much time as he did. So I do apologize. Those of you who are watching on YouTube, I know it's not exciting to watch still pictures all the time, but that's unfortunately the best I could do. So that said, let us jump right into our interview with Jordan Reid, ESPN draft analyst. I am pleased to be joined today by Jordan Reid. You guys might remember him from last year. He was with us for a few shows when he was with Pro Football Network. He has since moved up to the big time. He is an ESPN draft analyst, which I knew he was destined for big things. And he's actually speaking to us from his car. So we're unfortunately not going to have video of him, but we are going to be able to hear him. Jordan, thank you so much for taking the time to come on with me.
No problem. It's a pleasure being here.
Let's talk about the Combine. The Combine just recently wrapped up last week. I want to start, if I could, with your impressions. Did anything change for you as far as maybe surprises, certain position groups being stronger than others or weaker than others or anything like that?
No, and with the combine, the biggest thing that you want from it is to get some intel on certain players, of course, getting to understand their background, some things you may have some questions about. You get to go over some X's and O's, get them on the whiteboard and go over some plays. And then you really want to use the combine to confirm some things you saw on tape or to deny some things that may not have been there. So I think that's the biggest reason why teams use the combine. But going into the combine, their boards are pretty much set across the board.
Now, we've had different opinions come out as to what position groups are strong, which ones aren't. I want to get your take on that. Where do you see the strength of this draft class coming out, and where are the positions where, if you're an NFL team, you look towards free agency, or maybe you look for a stopgap?
Well, the great thing for the Giants is that all of their weaknesses on the roster right now, I think they align with the strengths of this draft class. And talking about edge rusher, I think that's by far the deepest group amongst this crop. And also cornerback. I think those two are probably the strongest right now. And you even could say offensive tackle, especially in the first two rounds. I think there's a lot of depth through the first round, and then also some portions of the second round too.
I want to ask you about the quarterback position, because I know a lot of people seem to be of the opinion that the quarterback class this year isn't really as strong as maybe the one that's going to come out next year. And I mention that because there's still some questions as to whether Daniel Jones is a franchise quarterback, or are the Giants better off getting a placeholder and trying again next year or whatnot. What's your take on this quarterback group?
Well, the interesting thing about this quarterback group is that it's a little bit different than what we have seen over the past 3 years. And we've always had that bona fide quarterback one that has stuck out and really grabbed our attention at the top of the draft. And even going back to the last 3 years, and Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, and then last year with Trevor Lawrence, we already knew who was going to be that quarterback one at the top of the draft. So this draft class is very reminiscent of that 2018 class when we had Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Sam Darnold, and the list goes on and on of that 2018 class where we had 5 quarterbacks go in the first round. So I think this draft class is not as strong at the top as that 2018 group, but as far as the intrigue, as far as we don't know who's going to go or be the first quarterback off the board, I think it's very similar.
All right, Giant fans, we have more still to come on today's program. But first, BetOnline is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline.net is also the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news, whether it's basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, or your favorite Vegas games. Head on over to their website today, betonline.net, and start learning about the trends and all the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. I know you study a lot of tape. We have a situation in New York where we've got Brian Daboll, the new head coach from Buffalo. He hired Mike Kafka, who comes from Andy Reid's system out in Kansas City. The two systems are probably going to marry somewhat. And also we have Daniel Jones providing input into plays that he likes to run, probably stemming from his days in Duke and whatnot. With that said, based on what you know of those systems, what are we looking at as far as ideal tight ends, what they need for that offense, ideal receivers, and who are some of the names that you think might be good fits from this draft class?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think there is some guys that they could go maybe in the second or even the third round. I think that's an area where they could target some wide receivers. But I think with this offense, you really want some guys that can get yards after the catch, just because they're going to be put in certain predicaments of where they have to read coverages on the run. But the big idea in that Andy Reid type of system, which is where Mike Kafka originated in, is that they want to be able to create advantageous opportunities before the catch, but also put their playmakers in position to get yards after the catch too. And if you think about it, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, even Mecole Hardman being so creative with your playmakers. So I think Jalen Tolbert from South Alabama is somebody that they could target. Jameson Williams, if they want to trade back from that 5th or that 7th spot and maybe get into the late teens or somewhere like that to take him. There's so many different type of receivers that they could take in this draft. I don't think any receiver in this class is worthy of 5 or 7 at the top. But if they want to take somebody in the second round, they could look to go somewhere along those lines.
You mentioned possibly trading back, and I want to ask you about that. Normally, teams will trade back if there's a surefire quarterback prospect. And having just mentioned that, maybe this class isn't as strong for quarterbacks, I mean, do you anticipate that might mean fewer trades, or are there other positions that you can see teams trading up to, or wanting to trade up into the top 10?
And that's the tricky thing about this draft class, honestly, Patricia, just because fans get so enamored with trading back and getting draft capital, but it takes 2 teams to tango, and you have to figure out a way to convince that team, or there has to be a player that they want to trade up for in order to secure if you want to trade back. So that's the difficult part about trading back. You have to find that trade partner or that person or player that they want to trade up for.
Now, this combine, I think if we had to summarize what this combine, the one of the main storylines, it's speed. I mean, have you ever seen so much speed exhibited at the combine, like what we saw, and not just at one position? We're talking at multiple position groups. And when you have something like that, Jordan, does that cause you to maybe go back and want to say, okay, why didn't we see the speed necessarily on tape? Or does it create any kind of concern, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's no concern. They installed a new turf this past season in the Colts and Lucas Oil Stadium. So I think that was one of the biggest reasons for the fast track. And then just athletes are developing and getting better every single year. I mean, 10 years ago, running a 4.4 was something to be enamored by. Now we have defensive ends like Amari Barno running a 4.37 at 6'5", 250 pounds, which is just unheard of. So I don't think there's any concerns or anything like that. I think it's just athletes are starting to evolve and just get better overall.
All right, now I want to ask you about the offensive tackle group, because I think, and I'm spitballing here, that if the Giants had their druthers, I think they would maybe want to take a bookend tackle to go on that offensive line opposite of Andrew Thomas. So the top guys, as I understand it, Evan Neal of Alabama, Ike Ekwonu of North Carolina State, and Charles Cross. I think he's Ole Miss, if I'm not, or Mississippi State rather. Just give us a rundown, a quick synopsis of the pros and cons in each, and which guy you feel is the best fit for the Giants.
Yeah, so I'll start with Evan Neal from Alabama. He's at 6'7", 337 pounds, which is what he came in at the combine. And I was really impressed with his physique overall. I actually posted a picture from the combine of everybody was questioning, is he 337 pounds, just because he's so well constructed. He originally started his career at Alabama at right guard. So he kind of was on that Alex Leatherwood, Jonah Williams, Cam Robinson type of plan of where they have so many 5-stars across the board, of where they just try to slot some of those young guys inside just because they have so much talent on the perimeter, which is what happened when he first got there. So he started his career at right guard during his true freshman season, then kicked out to right tackle, and then last season was his first at left tackle. So the great thing for him is that he is very versatile. He's gained experience from different types of surfaces, and I think that's going to help him translate on the next level. Just an absolute mauler in the run game. He has really good feet overall. Does need to work. He does need to work on some balance and some body control things. I think that's one of the biggest areas of where he could improve. But I think he has franchise left tackle written all over him. But he needs to clean up that body balance and just the control overall. He does end up on the ground quite a bit. That's one of the big concerns about him on the next level. But Ike Ekwonu, the more athletic of the bunch, or the most athletic of the bunch, I should say. He's about 6'4", 320 pounds, and he's played most of his career at left tackle. And the big thing with him is that he's so good as a run blocker. He has that physical temperament that you love to see offensive linemen play with, and he's just a hammer in the run game. Play after play after play. He's just so physical, and he's a tone setter. That's the two words really to describe him. Does need to clean up his pass protection quite a bit. He has a tendency to overset against defensive ends, so he just kind of shuffles out a little bit too much, and he leaves a two-way go, or he leaves the inside shoulder open quite a bit. So that's one area of concern of where he needs to clean up on the next level. And then lastly, with Charles Cross, I mean, a player that's just gotten better every single year that he's played football. He actually started his junior year of high school as a 3-star recruit. And by the end of his senior year, he was a 5-star and the best player in the state of Mississippi coming out. So that just goes to speak to his progress. Came into Mississippi State at 270 pounds, and then he measured at 310 pounds at the combine. So he's packed on that weight that you love to see, and he's the best pass protector by far of this group. He's just not very strong as a run blocker right now, and you can tell throughout his film. And it's just a matter of him gaining more experience. He played in that Mike Leach style of system where it was about an 80-20 split as far as pass to run ratio. So he just doesn't have a lot of experience with doing it.
So if you're the Giants and you're on the clock at 5 and you have your choice of the 3, who do you think's the best fit for them?
That's a really good question. I would go with Evan Neal, just because I just like the aspect of pairing him with Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas really came along last season. I was really happy to see that. He really looked like the franchise left tackle that everybody envisioned. But just playing sides means a lot to me. And what I mean by that is Ike Ekwonu's never played on the right side. So with offensive line, I'm one person that I'm just not fired up about the idea of just shuffling guys, especially putting them in a position that they have never played before. So Cross and Ekwonu have never played right tackle before, but Evan Neal has 15 plus games of experience at right tackle already. So just the mechanisms and just the mechanics of playing right tackle is something that's not foreign to him. So that would make me a little bit more comfortable playing him opposite of Andrew Thomas.
Now let's flip it to the defensive side of the ball. You've got Hutchinson, you've got Thibodeau, you've got Karlaftis, Trayvon Walker, all guys that are edge rushers or can rush the passer. Tell us a little. I doubt Hutchinson will make it down to the Giants. I'm having. I bet you he goes with like the first two picks, but Thibodeau, Karlaftis, Walker. These are names that have that might fall down to the Giants at number 5. So if you could just give me a quick synopsis on each one of them and who's a good fit for the Giants.
Yeah, I think 5 or 7 is a little bit too rich for Karl Loftus right now. I think Kayvon Thibodeau is the best of the bunch right now just because he's shown what he is as a pass rusher, and he has outstanding traits at 6'5", 255 pounds, a big-time recruit when he was coming in Oregon, a Cali kid. So the big lights of the New York media won't be too much for him. He has plenty of endeavors that he wants to do off of the field too. And he just plays so hard down in and down out. I don't really see the effort concerns that everybody's bringing up. But, I mean, everybody watches different things. So with Kayvon Thibodeau, though, he kind of reminds you a lot of Jadeveon Clowney just from an on-the-field perspective. There's a lot of splash plays, but in between those splash plays, you want to see him clean up some things. But he just has such natural ability as a pass rusher. You know, walking through the door, he has a chance to be an 8+ sack a year type of player, and even greater once he figures out how to marry his hand to those pass rush moves. And then the next one is Trayvon Walker, which was the darling of the combine, 6'5", 272 pounds. And the thing that you're going to hear about him is traits and tools. And what I mean by that is he has all the tools that you look for in the position, but he played a lot of what's called a tight 5 technique. So he's playing really tight on the outside shoulder of offensive tackles. So he didn't get a lot of opportunities to actually rush the passer. So you're kind of betting on those traits with him, but that size, that speed, running 4.59 at his size, you have no problem betting on him. You just would like to see a little bit more as a pass rusher. But whenever a player has that type of traits and then also size combo, it's very rare that they get outside of the top 8 picks.
Yeah, for sure. Now let me ask you this, Jordan, because everybody has their secret darlings, if you will, in the different rounds of the draft, sleeper picks, if you will. Who are some of your sleepers in day 1, day 2, day 3 that maybe we're not talking about enough now, but maybe the scouting community is more in tune with that might be fits for Giants?
Yeah, well, there's 2 that really stand out for me. And the first one is D'Angelo Malone from Western Kentucky. I like him a lot. Unfortunately, he did not run at the combine. I was really hoping that he would run a 40 so we'd get a 40 time on him, but really explosive, really came along really late during his career. He actually was a converted wide receiver too. So he just has those loose movements. He's just such a natural as a pass rusher too. And then the other one is Dominique Robinson from Miami, Ohio. Actually, I got them switched. So Dominique Robinson is actually the converted wide receiver, but he's only played defensive end for 2 years. And I just like the traits that he's been able to show off at the position. He's so good with bending the arc and cornering to the quarterback, has plenty of production during his time at Miami, Ohio. So if you're looking for guys in the 2nd or 3rd round, keep an eye on Dominique Robinson from Miami, Ohio, as well as D'Angelo Malone from Western Kentucky.
Now, I like to ask this question of my guests that are into the draft. Knowing what you know about the Giants' needs, I mean, I think we can all agree that offensive line has to be addressed in this draft. But we also know that they're not going to be able to address every position or every need, I should say, that they have. That said, if you had to group the Giants' priorities and weigh them against the depth of the class, what positions would you say they should be able to get in the draft versus maybe they might have to say, okay, maybe we go free agency here, or maybe we just kind of punt on this until next year?
I think edge rusher. I think that's obviously the big one that should be circled at the top just because they have to figure out a way to consistently generate pressure. And the Giants haven't been able to do that consistently. You could say cornerback. We'll see what happens with James Bradbury. They have a big decision to make right there. There's a lot of rumors swirling that he may not be on the roster next year. So we'll see what happens there. I think if you end up releasing him, that probably puts a hole at cornerback. And I know they have some depth there. Dory Jackson and some others are already there. They're hoping to come back and develop another year. But I think cornerback is another area of need, but also safety. I think safety is an underrated need depending on what happens with Jabril Peppers too. So secondary is an area where they could look to address.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's a good point, and one that I've made with the safety, because they've got Logan Ryan there, but I'm not sure he's long term for that team. I want to go back to cornerback if I could for a moment here. Derek Stingley Jr. from LSU is coming off of a foot ailment. How much do you think that's going to affect his draft stock, or is this talk about him possibly falling to the second round just overrated?
I don't think he's going to fall to the second round just because of what he showed on tape back in 2019, where he had that miraculous season of 6 interceptions. But the foot injury definitely is something that is very concerning. He's missed 15 games over the past 2 years. So, and there's an old saying of your best ability is your availability, and he just hasn't been available. So, whenever you're spending high draft capital like that, you're very reluctant to take an injured player, no matter how talented he is. And Stingley reminds me a lot of Marshawn Lattimore when he was coming out of Ohio State, just to paint a picture of who he could be on the next level. But once again, missing 15 games over the past 2 years, there's going to be a lot of concern with that. So there's going to be a lot of eyes on that April 6th pro day in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Oh, I bet. Definitely, especially coming off the injury. Now, all right, I want to talk about tight end because this is kind of interesting. We've seen three tight ends get the franchise tag in the NFL. I've heard enough people say that this tight end class is not really one that has people jumping up and down, but I want to get your take on it and who are some of maybe the late day two, early day three values that might be a good fit for a Brian Dable offense.
Yeah, so I mean, this tight end class is a little bit different, and it's kind of similar to quarterback, of where there's no tight end one at the top like we've seen in years past, even going back to last year with Kyle Pitts, who is just a different breed as far as the type of player that he is. There's no Kyle Pitts in this draft class, but second, third, and fourth round, there's a lot of depth overall, and I like this class a lot. I like it better, actually, than last year's class, honestly, outside of Kyle Pitts as far as the depth. From a depth perspective. So Jelani Woods is one that I like a lot, probably in that third or fourth round range from Virginia. He's about 6'7", 260 pounds. I got an opportunity to see him down in Las Vegas at the East-West Shrine Bowl, and I thought he was one of the better players there. Jake Ferguson from Wisconsin is another player that I think is that versatile, that has that versatile skill set. He's probably going to give you more value as a receiving threat as opposed to a run blocking threat, just because he doesn't have a whole bunch of experience as far as doing it. And at Wisconsin, of course, they run the football, but he wasn't one of those guys that you consistently want in the game when they are run blocking. He's more of a pass catching threat. So Jelani Woods, Jake Ferguson, those are two names that I really like a lot.
Another position that I think is kind of underrated for the Giants, doesn't get a lot of love or a lot of, that isn't talked about much, is inside linebacker. We don't know if Blake Martinez is going to be back as of this recording. He is, it's been reported that he's going to need to take a pay cut in order to stay, and that hasn't been settled yet. Who are some of the names that, can be a fit there? Because, the Giants also have Tate Crowder. They could bring back Jalen Smith. But I'm not, it's like if you can merge Tate Crowder and Jalen Smith into one person, you'd have the ideal inside linebacker. So who are maybe some of the names we want to keep an eye on at inside linebacker for that Wink Martindale defense?
Well, at the top, of course, you have Nicolby Dean from Georgia, who's a little bit undersized, about 5'11", 230 pounds. I mean, he just has a GPS on the ball. He's such a ball magnet. He understands how to read flow, and then attack as a first level run defender. But you do worry about the size a little bit, but the leadership qualities are off the charts. The intangibles, everybody speaks very highly of, especially in that Georgia defense. And with as many athletes as they had on that defense, he was the one that was the communicator, and he was the nucleus of it all. Then after that, you hear about Devin Lloyd from Utah, who was a converted safety, a little bit more athletic than Nicolby Dean. Overall, he's much longer too, at 6'3", 230 pounds. I love his ability to come downhill and strike defenders. It gives you value as a blitzer too. He can blitz off the edge and then also in the middle. And then Nicolby Dean's teammate and Quay Walker from Georgia too. I like him a lot. There's some question marks out there about him just because he's only a one-year starter. So a lot of people wanted to see him put a little bit more on game tape as far as more than 1 year. But the height, weight, speed combo is just ridiculous for his size.
Now, I want to flip back to the offensive line real quick. Ideally, I would think the Giants drafting at number 5, number 7, go offensive tackle, not and wait for like a guard or in day 2, or maybe even trade down for a guard. But that being said, the Giants are going to have to do a mix. They're going to have to draft. They're going to have to add via free agency based on the overall landscape of the draft, of the potential free agents out there. Where are the Giants best off maybe going into free agency and spending money? Would it be as at guard? Would it be at center? Or maybe even at tackle and just, using picks 5 and 7 for something else?
Yeah, I think with the depth of this class, they probably want to go guard and free agency. And there's some good ones in this class, Laken Tomlinson from the 49ers, and then plenty of others throughout this class too that are expected to hit free agency. So, and even if you want to wait for interior offensive line in this draft class. There isn't a whole bunch of depth at the top, but after that, there is some in the middle rounds. But there's someone that could go in the first round. Tyler Linderbaum, who's an outstanding center, could be an option. Kenyon Green from Boston College could be an option. He's played all three interior spots and then also tackle as well. And then also Zion Johnson from Boston College, who's probably going to be a late first, early second round pick too. So there's some depth at the top in this interior offensive line class, but also if you want to attack it in free agency, that would be understandable too.
All right, now final question for you, Jordan. Every year it just seems like something funky happens when the draft rolls around, that the NFL community sees things a lot differently than analysts and media and fans and whatnot. I know it's kind of early, we haven't had the pro days yet, but is there anything in particular that you're anticipating that maybe can upset the apple cart, so to speak, what we think might happen, that you can maybe see as a realistic scenario?
Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I think it would throw the draft a little bit in whack, and it would be Malik Willis going to the Detroit Lions at number 2 overall, just because they have a need at quarterback behind Jared Goff. He's entering the final year of his contract, and that coaching staff actually coached Willis at the Senior Bowl. So there could be some interest there. But if Malik Willis goes number 2 overall to the Detroit Lions, that definitely would shuffle or mix things up a lot at the top of the draft.
All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. So special thanks again to Jordan Reid of ESPN. You can catch him during the draft. I'm sure he'll be on TV along with Mel Kiper Jr. and the rest of the crew. And I'm looking forward to his draft analysis, like always. Make sure you keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast. We'll have more as we get ready for free agency, as we get into the pro days and work our way through to the draft. So lots coming up still to come on the Locked On Giants podcast. Have a great one, everybody.